Hello, entrepreneurs. Joe DeChara, entrepreneur with a CPA license, coming to you from downtown Bethpage, New York, Long Island. And I want to thank you for joining me here today. If you don't know who I am, here's a little bit about me and my background. I am the founder and CEO of Bedrock Business Builders, and you can see everything about us and me on our website, bedrockbusinessbuilders.com. And just a short version of my background, if you want to know why and how I'm qualified to be talking about this. Like I said, I am an entrepreneur, so I've gone through a lot of the pain and just about all of the pain and suffering as any other entrepreneur does when we try to start, build, and manage a small business. It's not as easy as it seems. But I'm also a licensed CPA, which I became a CPA about 35 years ago, as a way to learn about business. I didn't know that that meant I was going to be an accountant for all this time. But that's another story. But in that time, I've gotten to work with thousands of small business owners in all kinds of capacities, trying to help them, trying to serve them, really mainly to stay out of trouble with the IRS and any other agency that was trying to dip into their pockets, if that makes sense. So, what I'm going to talk about for the next 10 minutes are a couple of topics that I believe, in my experience, really throws new entrepreneurs off. And when I say new, people that are just starting out and people that may have started a couple of years ago, because once you get into the first couple of years, you start seeing the results of some of the mistakes that you may have made. So the first thing I'd like to do is start with the beginning. When does a business actually start? In all my years, over 40 years in business, I've never heard anybody ask the question like, when exactly does my business start? When can I start? Or when can I start writing off deductions? What people ask is, what can I write off? And I have a whole another presentation on that, but we can't go into all kinds of details. There's just simply not enough time. So the short story is that the business starts the same way as anything else, with a thought. If no action is taken, then there is no business. It stays as a thought. It's a fantasy. It goes poof. It's up there in the universe forever. Sometimes they come back and you do what we call take action. Once you take action on that thought, you are not officially, but you are technically in business, if that makes sense. For instance, if you decide you're going to be in business, you need office supplies. So you get in your car, you drive to Staples. Well, guess what? That's a business deduction because you just took action. You used property that you own for a business purpose. Now, the business purpose has to be that you're in this to make money. Okay. That's if you're not in it to make money, then it's either a not for profit or a hobby. And I'm not covering that today. So, this is how you start a business. Now, the second step is actually a step that happens for you and you don't even know it. Just like if you pass away without a will, somebody's going to decide what happens if you have children, if you have money. It's just not going to be you. So the same thing happens when you start a business. You are automatically, by default, classified as what we call a sole proprietor. That's your legal structure. Now, you only have a couple of other options that I go into in depth on my YouTube channel and my writings. But again, we don't have time to go into all of the different issues. But your choices are to be a corporation, a separate entity with a separate tax ID number. You can also become an LLC. Now, also, I'll back up a second. When you become a corporation, you have the choice of electing to be an S corp, a small business corp, if you qualify. And there's all kinds of rules uh, to qualify. Most people, if you're living in the United States, if you're a U.S. citizen, uh, you probably qualify to be an S corp. Now, the decision on what kind of entity you should do business on has to be done at your level, your current situation. You got to talk to somebody that's knowledgeable about legal business entities. Okay. Preferably a CPA or an enrolled agent that knows the tax ramifications. Attorneys are great, but they don't always take into account the tax end of things. And that there's a lot of uh, weight that has to be given on how much you're going to be paying in taxes, and that is a direct result of what kind of legal structure you're doing business in. Now, if you decide to be either an LLC or a corporation, you have to go to your state. You either go to the state uh, Secretary of State in your state. Okay, that's like a tongue twister, but you got to go to the Secretary of State where you live. Okay, and that's another issue about where you set up your entity. There's not enough time again to go into that, but 99.9% of the time it's going to be right where you live, right where you're doing business. So now you can do it yourself. There's ways to do it yourself online. It's really not that complicated, but if you would rather have somebody else do it, there's all kinds of places that will register your LLC or corporation. And when you do that, just so you're aware, you need to have what they call a registered agent. Now, the registered agent is the entity or the person that will get served legal papers if there's ever a lawsuit against the corporation. It's where the state Secretary of State will send mail. So if somebody other than you is the registered agent, you have to make sure that you stay in contact with them, because the state might be sending you bills, and if you don't pay them, then you're not a legal entity after a certain amount of time. Uh, the incorporator. So now, if you incorporate yourself, you are the incorporator. We incorporate people, and usually when I do it, I'm the incorporator. So the Secretary of State wants to know who is in charge. There has to be somebody that has a fiduciary responsibility. And that doesn't mean that I have fiduciary responsibility, but it's a way for them to contact somebody if they lose contact. The next thing that we look for is, are there any other business licenses that have to be registered for? And that's important, because especially if you're in something like the trades, a contractor, there's all kinds of state and local licenses that you may have to apply for, and that's very, very important. So it's not just the the state taxing and the IRS taxing authorities that are looking at you. It's the state, whatever organization, and there's a lot of them, and more of them just keep popping up, and their function is to get you to pay them money, to be in compliance with whatever the new rules and regulations are. Again, not just at the federal level, but at the state and local level. That's where everything really starts. Uh, Now, the last thing that I want to cover, because we're almost on 10 minutes, I want to keep this below 12 minutes, is the business name. Now, a lot of people get caught up on deciding about a name. Now, the name is important, but not for the reasons that people think. For instance, my business is called Bedrock Business Builders Corp. That's the legal name. Now I have bedrockbusinessbuilders.com That's just because that's our name, and we decided to use that domain as our domain name. But we also have several other websites, Bedrock University, Pro Bookkeepers. I have a couple of other entities, uh, and branding that is not Bedrock Business Builders Corp. it it all goes under the same tax ID number, but for branding, for marketing, a lot of times that's not the issue. So you could be XYZ Corp, I could be XYZ Corp, and still have my website. I don't have to go get a DBA or anything like that, a certificate. I do if I want to set up a bank account in that name and have money paid to that entity. So you can't be XYZ Corp, and somebody makes a check out to Bedrock Business Builders because you won't have a bank account to put it in. So you do, there's the formal requirements that you have to follow when it comes to banking and registration and stuff like that. And there's the marketing end of it. Now, also, and last but not least, the type of business that you do in an entity, in an LLC, in a corporation. You could have, I've had clients with 5 different types of entities under one corporate ID number. Now, for legal purposes, that might not always be the best way to do it. Okay, but I have had, one corporation had owned 3 restaurants, some other businesses. It was all reported under one federal tax ID number. I didn't set that up, somebody else did, but that was all legal. And people get caught up in when they're trying to think of their name, they get too caught up and wind up procrastinating on setting up the entity because of the name. So again, I want to, thank Omar and the production crew here for inviting me. I've enjoyed this podcast, giving it. I hope the information was of value to you. And if you want to reach out to me, it's very easy. I'm all over social media, and you can go to bedrockbusinessbuilders.com. And also bedrockuniversity.com. It's free registration for some really great courses that you could take for free. That's one of our gifts. And again, thank you, Omar. Back to you. Thank you.